At this point, our speakers will engage in some dialogue. We will start with Dr. Shermer, who will ask the first question. This will go on for several minutes, and then I'll ask Mr. D'Souza to question Dr. Shermer. Following the previous monologue, we do ask, clearly this is these are topics that are near and dear to all of our hearts, one side and the other, but please hold back your passions, make your seat twitch, but don't let your voice come out. So with that, and notice we didn't include any stones on the stage either. So anyway, Dr. Shermer, please initiate this course.
So how about those Packers this weekend? So Dinesh, I guess my first question is a philosophical one. Do moral standards purportedly set down by God exist separately from God? If so, then belief in God is not necessary, right? And if no, then those moral standards are subject to the whims of God, and that's why we see all these differing moral stories in the Old Testament. So in matters of human law, we can abide by a law without any knowledge of or belief in its author. Why can't the same be true of divine law?
Well, I would agree with you that moral standards are embedded, if you will, within human nature itself. They are embedded within human nature, I think, by God. In part, I say that because I cannot think of any evolutionary explanation for morality. Now, I realize there's a whole body of evolutionary scholarship, as you noted, trying to show why people benefit others who share their genes. I'm familiar with all that. But if I were to get up to give someone a seat in a bus who's nothing to me, or if, as in the Bible, the man helps the Samaritan who's a complete stranger, or if you donate blood without any hope of recompense, or if you say, give me liberty or give me death, or if you say, love thy neighbor, these ideas, it seems to me, can't be explained by an extended form of selfishness. So, can you practice them without resort to God? Sure, but who put them there? I think God did.
So if I could convince you that there was a good evolutionary model, would you concede that it's possible God used evolution to create the moral sentiments within humans?
I would certainly concede that that's possible, yes.
Okay, chapter 7 of this book here will get you there. Anyway. Because I do think there are good, but it would take too long. We can do that in the Q&A. And along these lines of Old Testament, New Testament moralities, assuming that these moral principles really exist there somewhere, given to us by God, how do you know what they are?
Well, I think that, well, the first thing to note about this is that morality is a human thing. There is, would you agree with me that there is no human species or group that is outside of morality? Morality is human, correct?
Yes, I would say the best we could get with primates is sort of pre-moral.
Now, there's been, Donald Brown has a study called Human Universals, the anthropologist, in which he describes more than 300 things that all humans from whatever culture have in common. This alone, I think, is an adequate refutation of sort of an extreme form of relativism that holds that essentially morality is purely individual or purely a matter of one group or the other group. He shows no, although that may be true at the margin, the core elements of human nature include a moral dimension, and he specifies very clearly what those are. So, if something is universal, has existed in all cultures, it seems to me that that is a good case for saying that that is part of our nature. Why else would it have developed everywhere? If you look at the moral rules and ask this question, which I also ask about physical laws, which is to say, how can you have laws without a lawgiver? There's nothing in our experience that would suggest that it's possible for immaterial things. I mean, there's nothing in our experience that says that this bottle of water has intention and purpose and can follow rules. If you have rules, whether the rules of nature, which can be called science, or the rules of human nature, either way, I think there is strong inferential evidence that these laws presume a lawgiver. Where else do they come from?
But how do you know what they are? I mean, divine revelation from God himself because you heard the voice? Or
No.
read it in a holy
No,
text?
I would separate theology from morality. The principles of theology, for example, the Trinity. I think that's the province of revelation. I would never try to persuade you based on reason to accept the Trinity. On the other hand, the golden rule, that's a moral principle. I would defend it on the basis of reason. I think that reason itself has been implanted by God. I would be hopeful that I could convince a Hindu or a Buddhist or even an atheist that it's a good rule to follow. So in that sense, these moral principles are in our nature. The atheist isn't so much rejecting God. The atheist is turning away from the voice of conscience in himself and denying that aspect of God imprinted on him or on her.
But what I'm after here is sort of divine law, natural law, difference, and let's say within natural law, I would throw my own theory of evolutionary origins of the moral sentiments. Outside of natural reason to get at natural law, how would you get at divine law? Short of asking and he tells you or she tells you.
There is no way to get at divine law other than some version of God told me. So that's why when it comes to divine law, there is no way to argue for it on the basis of, you can say, secular reason. On the other hand, you can understand this better by looking at something concrete. Take the abolition of slavery, for example. I would say that you can't reasonably argue that there is an evolutionary argument for why you shouldn't have slaves. You know, as I do, that for millennia human beings have had slaves. It was there in all cultures. If evolution kicked against it, we wouldn't have it. We had it for a long time. How did it stop? It stopped by someone asserting a principle that you asserted repeatedly in your speech, the principle of human equality. Now I would ask you, where does that principle come from? I would argue, I say historically, it comes from a theological principle translated into a social principle. So here's a case where God is the author, but man posits a natural law rooted in the divine law, applies it to politics, and that law is so effective that today you, as an atheist, but you're still an atheist with a Christian morality, still argue for that principle in defending gay rights and defending anti-slavery and defending women, and you say the Christians will take credit for it. The Christians should take credit for it because the principle of equality is a Christian principle.
But then why are Christians not supporting gay rights and gay marriage?
Because in life there are moral propositions. Equality is one of them. Human dignity is another. But there are also injunctions against sins, immorality, and so on. So it's not the case. I mean, there are times when principles come into conflict. You want to respect someone's dignity, but you also feel that what they're doing is wrong, and you have to figure out some way to reconcile those competing principles.
It's based on that one passage, and surely you would not endorse execution for adulterous women and disobedient children, right?
Right.
So why hang on to the gay thing? Why hang on to the gay thing and dump the others? I mean, what's your criteria? What do you judge to say, okay, I'll take this one and dump the other one?
Well, let's explore this, Michael. I mean, if you look at marriage, I see four aspects of the definition of marriage. Okay, four parts of the definition. Part number one, marriage has to involve two people and no more. Number two, these two people have to be adults. They can't be children. Number three, these two people have got to be unrelated to each other. They can't be brother and sister, for example, incest. Number four, one has to be a man, the other has to be a woman. You want to uproot principle number four. Why do you want to preserve principles 1, 2, and 3?
Well, in Tennessee, I mean, if you take the Mormons, you can ask me that when it's your turn to ask questions. In Joseph Smith's theology, who fully accepted Christ as his Savior, he had a revelation from God. And then, in 1896, suddenly, after the U.S. government says, you're not going to be doing this anymore, there was a new revelation from God, in which they said, God changed his mind, apparently, about polygamy. Isn't this a classic example of Christianity following a cultural trend, not leading it?
Well, I understand that there's another new one coming out from Mitt Romney, but anyway.
Who's had fewer wives than Giuliani, but that's another...
Romney says he thinks marriage should be between a man and a woman, and a woman and a woman and a woman. I don't want to go down this road only because, you know, in fairness, the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints, would not be considered as being mainstream Christians. But the broader point I think you're getting at here is a good one, and that is that we are human beings struggling to intuit and figure out and determine something whose origins are divine. It doesn't surprise me that different religions struggle with this, come up with different ways to get at it. In Islam, for example, there is a respect for the traditional family, but you can take up to 4 wives. Now, Islam disagrees with Christianity on theology. The morality of the world's major religions is not far apart. In fact, Hans Kung, the liberal theologian, assembled what he called a parliament of world religions, and he got people to sit down on a round table, and most of the moral propositions they agreed with. And I would submit that even secular people would agree with most of them. So all of this is a way of saying that ultimately religion here is supplying a transcendent basis for morality, and something very important, I think, for us fallible human beings, which is the notion of an ultimate cosmic accounting. You know and I know we live in a world where bad people succeed and good people come to grief. Wouldn't we all act a little bit better in the world if we felt that ultimately what goes around does come around? We know that that's not true in life. When people say what goes around comes, they know that that's a lie. A lot of times the bad guy gets away with it, the good guy comes. So the idea that there is cosmic justice in the world and that at some time, ultimately, we will all get our comeuppance. I mean, that's a little bit of a scary idea, but in some ways it establishes fundamental justice in the world. I think religion has done a lot of good by cementing that idea in the human mind.
I would like that to be true, for the same reason I would like, well, when I'm asked what's my position on the afterlife, I always say, I'm for it, of course, I hope it's true. But what I know from psychology is that what I'd like to be true and what is true are not always the same. And it would be nice if there was an ultimate lawgiver where Hitler really doesn't get away with it. Yes, that would be nice. But I don't know that that's true, and I don't think anybody else does either, which is why we still have these debates. So short of that, we do need a legal system, do we not, to settle these things now in this world as best we can, just in case it's not all going to be settled in the next world. Therefore, the importance of politics.
Of course we do. But my point is simply that the legal system would be a sufficient incentive for a morality that said, I should do this as long as I don't get caught. Because if I'm caught,